रहेको छ. Moving on to our next session, we are about to dive into a book discussion on the novel Swallowing the Sun. This captivating novel offers readers a powerful story of resilience, identity, and transformation. Fortunate to have two very insightful personalities to discuss it further. Before moving forward, we have one video, and so I request the technical team to play the video before the session.
भनिन्छ विश्वका सर्वोत्कृष्ट विचार र व्यवहारहरूको ज्ञान अनि त्यो ज्ञान हस्तान्तरणको प्रक्रिया हो संस्कृति.
Can you hear us? Okay, great.
Can you have a few seconds for the
Yeah, sure,
token of
sure.
love? Thank you, Mr. Chiragji. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Um, we know it's the second half of the day, and you guys have been very patient, the few that remain here, um, with the sessions that you've been attending back to back. And what a joy and an honor for me to be in conversation with Lakshmi Puri on her incredible, incredible novel, Swallowing the Sun. Um, For those of you who don't know about this book or have not heard of this book, we hope this conversation is able to convince you to go find a copy right outside, pick it up, browse through it, maybe buy it, read it, and get lost in this magical universe that she's managed to conjure up for us. Um, so many congratulations to you and to Alif and David for this tall feat. Since it got published early this year, it's become a national bestseller in India. It's one of those books that you saw in the reviews people cannot stop talking about in the Indian literary community. And Lakshmi has managed to do the impossible. She's managed to create, weave, craft a multi hyphenate, a multi genre novel that blends coming of age, that blends modern history, that blends at its deeply at its heart a very, very feminist novel. So many congratulations to you again. And it's been a few months of all the love that the book has got, that you have got, since the hardback edition of the book was published in January. How has this river of reception been for you? With people?
Well, thank you very much for those words of affirmation and coming from you, who is very much in the publishing world, and I'm not from that world. So it's always very reaffirming to hear it from uh, people from that world, the experts from that world, about the book. No, indeed, it has been a great discovery for me, a discovery of a whole new world and a new calling. As my novel has sailed out into the world, I have found so much resonance from all, from all ages, from men and women, and especially young people. Because the novel is about young people and about their aspirations and about their search for identity, self-realization, all of that. So it's about them, for them, by them. So it's something that has also really gladdened my heart. And also, it's pan-India. And I'm sure that in Nepal as well, it will have great resonance. Because as we said earlier today in the inaugural, uh, our ties, our cultural ties are so strong that there is a resonance across space and time and generations. So that's been, it's been a wonderful journey so far. And I've gone all over India. I'm going to South India now, end of this month. But I'm coming to Kathmandu is a special pleasure, as I explained earlier. You can see my little photo here with the Koiralas. So, this is a very, very sentimental moment for me, because also this book is dedicated to the man, apart from my mother, Malti. It is also dedicated to B.G. Murdeshwar, who gave 7 years This was his karma bhumi for 7 years. So it's very much, for me, a tribute to him and remembering him in a different way.
That's beautiful, and I like that you bring in a personal anecdote and your shared history, your family's shared history with India-Nepal relations, with the soil of Nepal, with the waters and cultures of Nepal, and what they mean to you even today. Moving on to the title of the novel, "Swallowing the Sun," which you borrow from a Muktabai Abhanga of the Bhakti tradition. And I'm going to read the epigraph translated from Marathi to English and then come to my question. The ant flies into the sky. She swallows the sun. Another miracle. A barren woman begets a son. A scorpion burrows down to the nether realms. And Shesha, the snake king, bows his head at its feet. A fly gives birth to a hawk. Muktabai sees all. Muktabai loves. What about this Abhang possessed you so much?
Firstly, this is something that my mother, who was a feminist, and my father was also feminist, brought to my attention when I was very young. And this is, so it was Muktabai herself who was someone very special. She was a symbol of women-led mysticism. She was a teenage saint and poetess. So, and today, this land is supposed to be a land of the Shakti Bhumi, but she is today known as Adi Shakti Devi, Chandi Devi, and worshipped in Maharashtra. And that a young woman should be a saint and be worshipped, that in itself was, for me, very inspiring. And then her messages, all her 41 or so verses, or Abhanga she wrote, they were just sublime. And this one in particular was something that my parents believed in and inculcated in us. And this one is gives a message that if you have faith in your purpose, in what you want to be, however limiting be the circumstances, you can attain the seemingly unattainable. Given, of course, apart from that, you must dare to do what is seemingly unattainable, and you must persevere. So that's the message. That's why this is a kind of epigraph that runs through all the different aspects which you have mentioned, the freedom struggle, the epic love story that this is, and the struggles they have, but they persist and they go through with pursue their love to its conclusion. And it is also a coming of age. The young people, in their attempts to realize themselves, break boundaries, defy the conventions. So this, and be extraordinary. Never think that you are just someone ordinary and you can never be extraordinary. So this is the key message of the book.
That's lovely. You've mentioned previously, and even in the preface to the book, the opening note to the book, you've mentioned that so much of this narrative, so much of Malti, Kamla, Guru, and all the characters surrounding them are inspired by your own parents, are inspired by your own family, inspired by events that shaped them, and the letters, for instance, that your dad wrote to your mom. You've been able to be inspired by that and weave those into this book. So, how come you chose to fictionalize their lives? And how come you took the liberties you did in order to craft the stories?
Yes, I didn't want this to be a biography. I always wanted to tell their story because it was so extraordinary and it was a story waiting to be told. But biographies are, it is said that facts hide the truth more than they reveal. So I wanted the truth to be told through fiction. And there were many things I couldn't have told if I had written it as a biography. So that was one. The other thing is that a biography would only appeal to the intellect. I wanted to appeal to the heart, to the soul of readers, and bring out, as they say, there is this the emotional truth that needs to be told, not only the factual truth. So that is best told through fiction and this novel modality that I have used. And then, of course, I've used poetry to also give it, to illuminate that reality.
No, that's wonderfully put. And, a lot of people would expect a former diplomat and her or their first book to be something like a memoir or a policy dossier or big commentary on world affairs. But I like that you chose fiction, and I like that you chose to work backwards from where you come from in order to tell the story of your family, the journeys they've had to take, the journeys your foremothers and forefathers took,
Absolutely.
so that you came to the place you did in life. So that was beautiful. I want to briefly talk about the literary devices you chose in order to craft the story, particularly the use of metaphors and symbolism. So much of what is being said on the surface tends to reveal what's happening in terms of action and description in the story. And so much of that is also to hide. There is definitely always a subtext, a running parallel, where you say something without saying it so
Yes.
directly and overtly.
Yes.
So I was very intrigued by your choice of metaphors and symbolism. Perhaps you could talk a little bit more about
Yes.
that,
Yes.
after which, if you could perhaps do us the honor of reading a short excerpt from the novel.
Absolutely. No, it's so important for me to dive into or dive back into the kind of mindsets or mindscapes that people of that era occupied. These were young people coming from this Malti, the main female protagonist, coming from a village school, being one of the pioneers to go into school, and then coming into an orphanage school, graduating, going on to Elphinstone College, getting Western education, and yet being very, very aware about her own cultural background.
And at a time when women's education
Women
was frowned
education.
upon.
She was one of the pioneers, and she has been shown to be. And then within that, to then reimagine herself. And then it's also Guru, it's the similar journey. So these young people are living in a universe which is very exciting. At one point, they are under tremendous pressure, and in a sense, as an oppressed race. The colonial oppression, they could well be they could well be living with a complex, with a sense of self-doubt. But how they emerge from that into really, reimagining themselves and reinventing themselves. So that's why I've used a lot of these symbols and metaphors. So let me read one paragraph, because metamorphosis and transformation and reimagining yourself, your society, your country is one of the key themes of this novel.
We would love you to please.
So, Malti and Kamla had come to believe that they were living in Bombay at a time when everything was being turned inside out and upside down, the improbable Muktabai way. It was as if the small sweet elchi bananas grew with their ivory colored, fragrant, sweet, pulpy flesh outside, enveloping their thin, yellow, blotchy skin inside. It was as if the Indian tiger had come out of the forest and sat supping with brown coolies at the starched linen covered table in the Gymkhana Club of Bombay, being served by British sahibs in red and white uniforms, doubling over to please the natives. It was as if the frail Indian ascetic, with nothing but the sword of his soul force, the shield of his khadi loincloth, and the cannon fire of the Indian masses, was breaching the iron and stone battlements of the great British Empire, riding on the waves of his tremulous voice. They cherished their freedom to become part of this miracle making, even if as a tiny particle. They did not want to lose their privilege. So this is one. So metamorphosis as a theme, as transformation. Then the other imagery or metaphors that I have used include how people can relate to nature if they are only listening. So there is a passage here where the young girls are getting ready. Imagine young village girls who have been in an orphanage girls' school coming in to Elphinstone College, co-educational, uh, being taught by British professors. So the anticipation of that, the fear of that. So they go to the seaside and they remember what their mothers had told them. Mother had told them that if you listen to the shells, the conch shells, they speak to you. But when they were little girls, they didn't speak. But then when they come and they want to listen, they can hear. And the messages that they get, the affirmation that they get from the sea. So nature speaks to you. So there are many other themes, like also the concept of Ardhanarishwar. I've illustrated that in all of us, there are attributes of a man and a woman, and no one can exclusively claim to have them. And there is this very, very much, I think, appreciated description of the celestial singer Bal Gandharva, the great Bal Gandharva, how he essays the role of women and how he is the Ardhanarishwar incarnate. So there are many other ideas as well. For example, the concept of goddesses and the man. How India is uniquely, and I think we heard today that how many goddesses do you have? I heard that you have some, I don't know, 33, Koti goddesses, okay? So our culture, Indian and Nepalese culture, is one uniquely that deifies women. And at the same time, there is a disconnect when we actually treat them as the fifth caste, as I say in the book, as I says, that, women are the fifth caste. So this whole concept of how we should, that women should claim this goddesshood, and how men can be supporters and enablers of that. And Baba is typically the man, the father of these girls, Kamla and Malti. He fights for them to be educated, to escape child marriage, and take up a career, choose their own. Eventually, he comes to, terms with their choosing their own partners. So all of that is in itself this concept of goddesses and the man. And so, and there are others, destiny versus individual free will. And there is this, the metaphor of the great puppeteer above. To what extent do we control our own actions? To what extent are we really being able to exercise free will? And there are many passages there, the twists and turns, the flick of the puppeteer's hand. There's a whole chapter on that. So there are many of these metaphors that play, mud in the lotus pond. So these are all, some of the metaphors I've used in plenty.
And I'm glad you use them very liberally and quite indulgently. The other thing I'm very curious about is that, of course, apart from being now a celebrated, best-selling, successful novelist, you've also had an incredible career as a diplomat and an illustrious one, particularly as director of UN Women, among many other sort of feathers in your cap. But I do wonder, the cause of women, the feminisms of our, foreparents that we were talking about, the zeal of social justice, a lot of those ideas and ideals that have inspired your own life and your own career must have fed in to the writing of this book. Could you talk to us about how your own life and your career fed some of this fiction?
Absolutely. I have this, Indian civilizational beliefs that I have carried around with me in my diplomatic career around the world about the perfectibility of humanity. You know what Swami Vivekananda said, that uniquely again, Indian ethos and thought and even spiritual belief is about the perfectibility of humanity and the deathlessness of human spirit, that you can never accept defeat, the human spirit, and the endurance of hope. So all of that, plus in the United Nations, where I was for 15 years in different capacities, but most recently, as you said, with UN Women, I have also, of course, advanced ideas of justice, freedom, equality, and overall, transformation, and setting a new narrative and swallowing the sun in so many ways. And gender equality and women's empowerment is one of those missions which are seen as impossible. And therefore I say, swallow the sun.
But I wonder, where do you see the sort of women's emancipation project today, if you were to assess it from the contemporary lens that we are in? If Malti and Kamla were around us, young
Yes.
women today, what would they be
Yes.
like?
Well, they would be happy about the progress made so far, because what they did and what they accomplished was really ahead of their times. They were pioneers and they were breaking glass ceilings. But they would have expected much greater progress. Globally, it is said that we are still lagging behind. And, SDG 5, the Sustainable Development Goal 5, on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, we are 100 years behind. If it will take more than 100 years to reach those targets at the pace at which we are going. So there again, I say, they will say, follow Muktabai. And you have in every area, whether it's economic empowerment, political empowerment and representation, voice, participation, all of that. Then in terms of things like child marriage, we still, in our two countries, we still have this problem. Harmful practices. I was meeting my good friend Bandana Rana yesterday, who's an activist here, and she was just returning from some, awareness campaign she was doing on this. So we still have a long way to go, and Malti and Kamla would say the more things change, the more they remain the same, but it should not be the case. And they would urge that surely 100 years later, we could have seen more change.
Yeah, it was very
And the
well
new
said.
normal.
The new normal, for
Yeah.
sure. Of course, we're all waiting with bated breath if Malti and Kamla were to be contemporarized, and if a sequel of sorts were in the works, that would mean a lot to the readers. But also the fact that this is a novel about women in the 20th century, set in colonial India, where these women are trying to go against all kinds of odds to swallow the sun, to make it in life. And this is happening through the 20th century, the early part of it, through the middle of it. But parallelly, what I loved about this setting is that it's also the story of an emerging India, right?
Yeah.
It's a story of a anti-colonial struggle, the nationalist period. There is a great degree of rage and fervor and enthusiasm to break the shackles of imperialism, and a kind of united call for many kinds of freedoms.
Yes,
Of course, there
yes.
were various articulations of what that freedom looked like. But parallelly, there was a kind of cultural renaissance happening in our songs, in our poetry, in our
Yes.
literature,
Yes.
in our theaters, in what was said and done, and stories that were shared. So paint us a picture of this cultural renaissance of the 20th century Indian subcontinent.
So I can say about the novel, and I think Namita Gokhale, who's my mentor and friend, she told me that one of the distinctive aspects of my book was that it's the first, probably the first book, a novel by an Indian writer in English that explores and brings out the beauty and depth and richness of Marathi culture. So it was there was a renaissance around that time in Marathi culture and Marathi literature, theater, music, Natya Sangeet, so that panoply of all of that I've tried to evoke. And it was also meant very much linked to the tumult and upheaval. And I think in times like these, when there is socio-political upheaval and ferment, it becomes a very fertile ground for cultural, cultural renaissance and efflorescence. So that's what happened, and I have brought that out in so many ways. For example, there is a play within the play, and let me also say that this cultural renaissance is very much linked to a civilizational reawakening that is happening, even as they are hungrily imbibing Western ideas, and even Western culture, poetry, which I have quoted the characters, mouthing. And at the same time, they are becoming very fiercely aware and proud and confident about their civilizational heritage and identity. So that is both this awakening and cultural renaissance acts as a kind of soul force for their participation in the freedom struggle. And as you rightly said, the young people of that time, I've tried through this novel to bring out the importance of young people trying to not only look to themselves as individuals, but be part of society, part of the nation, and, reimagine it and contribute. And in this case, I show how in the freedom struggle, there were ordinary young men and women who gave their best. They were not the Mahatma Gandhis or Madan Mohan Malviya or Nehru's, but they gave their best. And Veer Savarkar, or Annie Besant for that matter. But they gave their best, and without them, these great figures would not have achieved the results that they did. So that is the other part. And also I've emphasized the role of women, young women, which is, again, they are the unsung heroes, I call them. So I've, in a way, tried to tell her story rather than just the history of this period, personal and national, as I
Parallelly, these two tracks happening,
Tracks.
where the community, the nation, and society are parallelly sort of moving forward, and I
That's
love
right.
that.
And if I may just come back to the play. So there is a play by Mama Varerkar, one of the revolutionary playwrights of the time. And he wrote a play called Satte Che Gulam, that is enslaved by power. And these young people, as their first act, patriotic act, they stage this play in Elphinstone College, and then they form cells around it, Satte Che Gulam cells, to support Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha movement. So, there is this link that comes up. And within that, of course, there are many debates that Guru and our Malti have on man-woman relationships and other issues. What is really patriotism? Can you be Western educated, serve the government, and still be, all those. And also ideological debates, which is the best way to win freedom. So all those happening at that time. Similarly, as I said, the earlier I mentioned in the context of Ardhanarishwar, there are 2-3 beautiful chapters on him and the persona and what that world of Marathi theatre was and how influential it was, even for social reform.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like that you pay homage to the unsung heroes and heroes of the freedom movement, the many, many ordinary people that help build the foundations of our nations and this
Absolutely.
region.
Right.
And many Maltis and many Kamlas really that sort of paved the way for us to and share this context under this roof. One of the other joys, Lakshmi, for me, about swallowing the sun has been the indulgent and also maybe the discretionary use of poetry from many poetic traditions, from Sanskrit, from the Bhakti tradition, from Marathi, even English. And you, as you read the novel, and I really urge you pick up a copy of the book, get her to sign it for you, and drown in this incredible universe that she's created. But peppered through the novel are a lot of these poetic sort of interjections and segues that she relies on. So, how come you chose such a lot of poetry in this novel? Talk to us about that.
Yes. So let me begin by showing you, and I hope the camera can capture this picture. This is a copy of, illustrated copy, 1983, of a manuscript of 1926, where my father has had for Lakshmi. So my father was a poet at heart, but also living it every day. You know, my good friend uh, Ranjit Hoskote has written a poem called The Poet. And the first line is, he was married to bird song. So I can say that about my father. And he used to read a poem a day, in every evening, he used to read a poem and he used to sing it out. So, and these poems were his favorite poems, but he was also a poet himself. He had written for various magazines. Yashwant, the great poet, used to have a magazine. So these young people, you know, that was part of the cultural efflorescence that happened. So, you know, and my both my parents were lovers of English, Marathi, and Sanskrit poetry. So So that's how I have woven into the tapestry of this novel poetry to also, as I said, you know, it's, you know, to make words and thoughts breathe, you know, and come alive. So let
Will
me
you
just,
indulge us by reading us some of your
yes.
favorite poems?
And, you know, he had a different tune for each to convey, especially Marathi poetry. He had a different tune to convey the feelings of that a poem conveyed. So there was the love poem where the hero Guru proposes for the first time to Malti and declares his love. And then there are other love poems, but also there is the poem about a Gulam play where they are sing to you. So let me say this in Marathi. This is the love poem, an ode to the evening goddess. मेघांचे करी भूर्जपत्र धरुनी अस्तांचली प्रत्यही स्वर्गीचे नवलेख कुमकुम रसे ती सांध्य देवी लिही रात्री शांत गभीर अंबुनिधीच्या अनिल पृष्ठावरी लज्जालेख लिही विकंपित करे ती तारका सुंदरी सारे ते मग लेख तुच्छ गमती चित्ताची आलोचनी तिचा क्षयलेख एकच उभा नारायणी.
That was beautiful. My God.
So, the translation in English, I'm sure some of you, the Nepali speaking people, would understand many of these words because they are Sanskrit and, you know, common words. But let me read them. Holding the birch bark of clouds in her hand, the glorious sunset as a perennial witness grand, her pen dipped in the red sap of my love infinite, the evening goddess writes a new missive exquisite. With enchanting shyness, her cheeks suffused. My beloved rests her lotus head on my chest bemused. She creates our love epistles mystique. in the poetic language of our breaths unique. All these other lyrical outpourings, magnificent. In my heart's eyes seem so true. I am the sole, rapt and discerning reader vernal in the universe of this, my beloved's love letter eternal. So this is a
Fantastic.
sample of a love letter, a love song or love poem, and then the Veeras, the patriotic poem by Yashwant, the great Yashwant. And the previous one was by Baal Kavi, and it is also in the cover of the first page of the
Yes.
novel. The other one, which I've also used, is Yashwant's Vadude Karagruhacha. Vadude Karagruhacha Bhintichi Unchi Kiti Manmana Nahi Shiti Bhinticha Unchi Tarahe Kaya Atma Konduni Muktato Ratrandini. So let the walls of the prison grow higher and higher. My strong heart will never be shaken or tire. My patriotic soul can't ever be kept in thrall. It is free to roam in the day and at nightfall. My devotion to my motherland rises within me, step by step, like flood waters gushing to be free. So, these are two samples, but then there is Ode to the Mother
Of course.
and so many other, beautiful poems that have been invoked. Also ditties, the folk ditties that were in use and which I have created also.
Yeah.
So it's strewn around.
Blessed
yes.
is the reader to have such a vast repository and reserve of poetic knowledge that you have seamlessly, because you were hoping that it blends seamlessly with prose. Let me assure you it does.
Thank you.
Seamlessly woven into the text, and we're only glad the novel's only gotten better with these interjections. Now, I would like to sort of open this up to the audience that's patiently been here and to the younger audience that's perhaps impatiently been listening to us. So great job, everyone. If you have questions, please raise your hands. We want questions and not comments. And if you can keep them brief, that would mean the world to us. So if you have questions, maybe just raise your hands and maybe we'll have a mic be passed around. This person in the front in the black dress here, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. Ma'am, I would like to ask you whether you feel satisfaction in your job, just like you have done job in UN and foreign affair also, or you enjoy or you get satisfaction in writing things, I mean literature. This is my question to you.
Shall we take a few or shall I keep answering? How do you want
We
to-
could take a few. Just raise your hands again if others have questions.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your nice talking. I really appreciate you and you very warm welcome to Nepal, Kathmandu. I have one question to you. What should be the character of one writer? What should be the character of writer to be a writer? Please, thank you.
Okay, so we
So
have
let
one
me
question
answer.
on what you enjoy more,
So
work
let
or
me
writing.
answer.
These two for now?
Yeah. So, I think writing a novel is something that is nothing like what I have done before. And it has a special joy to it, particularly this one, because it's a labor of love. It was something that was within me for decades. I've always wanted to write it, but had started doing only 20 years ago and then left it 100 pages and then finished it only
And we're
during the
glad you did.
COVID years. So, and that too because I said, if I die tomorrow, this will not be written. So I have to write it. So I completed it with him. So now what I'm saying is that the joy of is that of an act of creation, of playing God, creating characters, changing their destiny to be the grand puppeteer, the sutradhar. So it's nothing incomparable. And I therefore hope to, as you said, hope to probably have a sequel plus some other themes that I want to explore. And this time it may be more to do with my life in diplomacy. So, but not by autobiography. It will be very much fiction, because for the reasons I've already explained. And yes, you were asking me
The writer's character.
Huh?
The writer's character.
Character. I'm a new. My father used to have a very interesting term when you start your career. He used to call them, we call them probationers. He used to call them tadpole doctor, So tadpole. So I'm relatively new. So I'm that I'm no one to prescribe what should be a character, but I think there has to be an element of creativity, of daring to be different, of speaking the truth about people and things, and also expressing your innermost thoughts. Sometimes we are held back. And I experienced that, because if you are not used to it, you are afraid to reveal yourself too much. Because the book is, somebody said to me, the first book in particular is so much of you. So,
Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri, it's been an absolute delight and what an
Thank you.
honor to be in conversation with you. Can we have a round of applause for
my pleasure for, as I said, your being here to present this book, and to give your own thoughts, because they matter to me, and I think to our audience here in Kathmandu.
I was
Thank
only
you so
glad
much.
to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to you.
And thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And please do get the book. And I'm here to sign. And let's continue this, what shall I say, love between us.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of our speakers for such a wonderful, beautiful, and rhythmic session. Thank you so much, ma'am, and congratulations on your book. I look forward to reading the novel. And for the token of love, I would like to invite Mr. Provide the token of love to our esteemed guest. Token of love with love from Nepal. We are very glad to have you as a guest speaker at our event. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.